and welcome to another edition of Two Steps Ahead Podcast. Two Steps Ahead Podcast encouraging you to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom, and coming up on the show, I got a message from somebody that asked me the question, how do you make your passion happen? And I thought about it for a moment because I always thought it was like an easy answer to the question. How would you do it? Well, you just find out what you want to do and then go do it, right? But I guess it might be a little bit harder for people to understand how you do that. So that's what we're going to talk about is how do you make your passion happen? And we're going to do that through a conversation with David here, who's going to join me in a minute. And one of the things, if not a couple things you can get out of this conversation is, one, what it takes to actually make something happen. When you make something happen, you have to do it. People think it's fate, maybe destiny. If you're the Back to the Future fan, maybe density. And you just sit back and whatever happens, happens. But a lot of times we have to take control, and that's what we're going to talk about, taking control of our lives, making those decisions and doing things that can help us make our passion happen. And then the other thing, too, maybe if you listen and you get this out of it, it might be helpful as well, that there's key components to things like networking and to building relationships, even though they might be competitors, even though they're in the same industry and maybe you're playing against them or competing against them. It's still important to develop those relationships with people that are in the business together, whether it's the business field, the athletics, the music. I mean, you talk about people in music all the time sitting there and collaborating. I mean, you'd be surprised how many songs Barry Manilow have written for people. Then you'd be like, really? He wrote music for them? Or maybe Richard Marx wrote music for them? And so collaboration, networking, building relationships, even though they might be competitors, is another big thing, too, that we're going to discuss through this conversation. And so as we get started, the conversation is going to start out kind of like one of those movies or TV shows that starts in the now, and the action is going, and you don't really know what's going on, just a lot of action and chaos. And then it kind of fades back to maybe 2-3 days earlier, or maybe 2-3 hours earlier, and then it starts the story that then leads up to the chaos that the show started with. So that's kind of going to be the framework for how this thing works. And again, joining me is David. He's a graduate student at the University of Oklahoma, works in the strength and conditioning program for the men's and women's college basketball teams, as well as the men's tennis team. And so as we get started, we're going to start off with what's going on at Oklahoma. Then we're going to jump back and watch that path as how he got to Oklahoma. And so I guess the first question would be, when you are sitting there at Oklahoma, you're on the cusp of the SEC. You've got an athletic powerhouse with football. Basketball has done quite well over the years. I mean, Blake Griffin, for one, comes out as an NBA player. Dunked over a car at the All-Star Slam Dunk Contest. So Oklahoma, their baseball, their softball team has won 4 straight national championships. So you're kind of in a hotbed of athletic activity at a very good school, going to the SEC, one of the best conferences. What's it like being there at a program that is so prominent in athletics?
Yeah, it's pretty prime time being at OU. It's one of the top universities in terms of athletic departments in the country, I would say. And, you know, we're making that switch to the SEC this year. And we know going from the Big 12 to the SEC, it's going to be different. There's going to be some challenges, but I think we're specifically in basketball and tennis with the sports that I work with. We're ready for it. We're excited for it. We accept competition, which I believe is why OU is so successful. We're not afraid of any team or any level of competition. We want to go out to be the best, and if we want to do that, we have to go out and play the best. So I think as a whole athletic department, we're very excited for this opportunity ahead of us this year.
Now, last year you guys were in the Big 12, moving to the SEC. Obviously, it's summer. There's been some downtime, but you guys have kind of picked up a little bit. Has there really been any notice in maybe excitement, hype, players talking about it, making that move? Because I know, like, for example, it was a big deal, made the headlines when that SEC logo went on the football field, and that got a lot of publicity, especially at Oklahoma Football Media Day. Any hype or anything like that, or is it just kind of people are still coming in from summer, doing their summer workouts and getting ready for the school year?
When it first happened, there was some excitement like usual, changing conferences, especially going to a top conference like the SEC. It was pretty exciting, but after the week or so, when all the media hit, we just went back to going to work. And there'll be some comments here now from the players. I'll say for the women's basketball team, we get to play South Carolina this year at South Carolina, who was undefeated last year and won a national championship. So, there's some talk about that, and they're pretty excited about it. But it's all in a day's work. We know that we have to get ready for these competitions when they come in the fall, when season starts, and we want to be ready for it. So we can sit there and talk about it all day, but if we don't go to work and show up when it's time, then it's not going to amount to anything.
One of the quotes that I've heard recently, I don't remember if it was like someone like a Nick Saban or somebody in the basketball world, but they said that strength and conditioning coaches are becoming more and more important because when you have healthier players, your team obviously is going to perform better and you're going to have your full team at full strength. But then also, too, you have to have an understanding of what bigger, stronger, faster means as far as the players, because for each individual athlete, depending upon the sport, bigger, faster, stronger might mean something different depending on who they are and what position they play. Has there been an emphasis put on strength and conditioning since you got into that field over the last couple of years? Has there been more of a focus on that, have you felt? Or is there an emphasis that's being put on it? Just kind of what's the overall feeling for the world of strength and conditioning when it comes to the college athlete?
Yeah, so I think the underlying factor of a strength and conditioning coach is going to be bigger, stronger, and faster. That's kind of the big three when talking about it. But as I'm getting into it, I'm starting to understand that the field itself is making a switch to try to bridge the gap between strength and performance to performance on the court. So an example is, you might come in and you have a guy who's maybe a little smaller and the head coach thinks he needs to put weight on and he needs to get bigger. Is that necessarily the best thing for that guy? Right? Like we can take a numerous amounts of NBA players, for example. Like we can take Kevin Durant, one of the best scorers in the history of the game, I would argue, and he doesn't lift. So how much better could we get him if he was bigger, stronger, faster? So I think understanding, yes, an underlying principle of our job is to get these athletes bigger, stronger, and faster, but there's so much more in the field in terms of fitness, in terms of just improving little things like a hip turn in a basketball, a defensive slide. If I have a point guard who is going to, say at the top of the key, who starts driving to my right, if my hip turn is slow and he beats me off that first initial movement, then he's going to get to the basket every time. But if my hip turn is efficient and I can beat him off that first move, then he's not going to get anywhere. So implementing sport-specific movements to try to help increase their performance, that's where, as I'm learning, is kind of the range or the area of where this field is going.
Now, you got your undergrad at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. When I was going through college and I was doing, back then, the science of physical education, or I don't think it was called strength and conditioning, but basically it was your conditioning program. One of the books that we had to read, a textbook, came from the University of Nebraska. They were on the cutting edge of football. And their philosophy at the time for football was, okay, instead of doing just long-term conditioning, what's your player going to do? So, for example, a lineman. He's going to be sitting there at the line, at the snap of the ball. He's got 5 seconds or whatever it is, and he has to burn all his energy in that 5 seconds as he's pushing at the line. Then he has 40 seconds, 35 seconds to recover because that was the time clock, the play clock. And then he has to build up that energy to burn it all again. Anyways, they were on the cutting edge, and as we were learning this, it was kind of some new stuff that people on the West Coast were just starting to understand. So Nebraska has always been on the cutting edge of that strength, conditioning, performance. And so you got your undergrad at the University of Nebraska. But what made you go into or decide that strength, conditioning, performance was something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so Nebraska's somewhat the foundation of college strength conditioning. Boyd Epley is kind of the godfather of strength conditioning. He started it at the University of Nebraska when he was there as their strength coach, when the glory days of Nebraska football. I played athletics. I was fortunate enough to play a couple years of college ball in my first couple years of college, so I was exposed to a strength conditioning program. Nothing to the level that we're doing at OU or what I was exposed to at the University of Nebraska. But it was something where I was always interested in fitness, but I wasn't exposed to what fitness can be when you're looking for performance increases. And so training for performance was something that I learned in playing those first 2 years of collegiate sports. And I thought, this is so different than what everyone else is doing. I have to see about getting involved in it. So I ended up going to the University of Nebraska to finish out my undergrad, and I got the opportunity to get an internship, and actually found out about an internship from one of the certified personal trainers at the rec center, and he told me to apply for it. So I ended up getting it, and the rest is history.
So you get this job at the rec center. Was this like a summer job? Was it something that you just tried to do to fill time, or was it something that had a purpose behind it?
Yeah, this so the professor that I would talk to, he was one of my professors for, it was like a general intro to lifting class or something very basic. And so I got pretty close with him, and we started working out together. So I would go and meet with him to try to get my foot in the door somewhere, because I knew fitness was something that I wanted to pursue. And so as we would talk and get to know each other more, he understood that the realm of sports and athletes were more of what I was interested in instead of general population. And so he had brought up this internship that was coming up in the summer, and he said, you should apply for it. You know, I'll be a letter of rec for you. And so I went and applied for it, and I ended up getting it. And so he was kind of a introductory to this internship that I had no clue. I had heard about it, but I really didn't know what it was. I thought it was something that you had to know people to get into, because that's what the field really is. It's more about who you know versus what you know, is what I'm understanding about being in the strength conditioning field and just athletics as a whole. But he was kind of that first kind of guide to push me into going into doing something, because he saw that I was interested in it, and I guess he figured I would have been good at it, talking about working with athletes instead of general population. So he pushed me to do it. I ended up applying, and I ended up getting it.
So for people watching, taking notes, school's about to start across the country at all levels. And the one thing we hear, the first thing that comes to mind here is a professor, a relationship with a professor. A lot of times you're sitting in class, you're at college, you're just trying to get through, you're taking whatever classes you need to get your education. But the first who you know is going to be a professor. The first who you know or who you knew maybe was your high school coach, or maybe your high school drama coach, or your theater coach. Whatever you're into, the who you know at this level is going to be your teachers, your professors, people on college, on campuses. And so that's the first thing to make note of, is that the who you know. It's okay to get to know your professors. It's okay to build relationships with them, because it could lead to opportunities such as maybe an internship. And so then from that internship, then things really started to take off. What happened after the summer and that internship came to a close?
Yeah, so the internship originally was 10 weeks in the summer. So we had our 10-week summer period of training where guys would come in the beginning of June. We'd go through until early August, and then guys would go home and the internship was over, and then they would do a new cycle of applications and applying for their new fall interns. So I was blessed. I got to be assigned with men's basketball, and so I got to work with, his name is Kurt Joseph. He's the director of men's basketball strength conditioning at the University of Nebraska. And so after a couple weeks, I realized this is what I wanted to do. So I made it my goal to show up every day and be the best intern in that class of 10 interns who got those positions. So in doing that, I would be the first one in, I'd be the last one out. I would try to be there every day. And when basketball was over, I would try to be as much assistance I could for any other of the teams and the coaches that were in the weight room. And so I really wanted to stay in this internship and continue to learn from Coach Joseph, because I realized that he had such an impact on me early on in the internship and invested so much in me that I could have grown so much more, say, a year versus 10 weeks.
And so, one, you make a relationship, or you develop a relationship with a professor that leads to an internship that then leads to a connection with Coach Joseph, who's the basketball strength and conditioning performance guy. And so the internship is over. And so then what happens. You're able to get on with the basketball team. So how did that work out? How were you? I know you talked about the work ethic. That's the other thing to learn, work ethic. Be there before, be there after. When the season's over, be there to help others, whether it's not even your sport, maybe other sports, but just to be there. But then how did that, to be able to be associated with the basketball team itself, did Coach Joseph tell you anything specifically that as why he maybe picked you, why he saw or what he saw in you as why he wanted you to be a part of his staff? Was there any feedback, I guess, that he gave to you to indicate that this is why you were chosen?
Yeah, so the biggest things that he had told me was you have the tangibles that you can't teach, meaning showing up early, having a good demeanor, working well with the guys, being relatable, certain things that most individuals might not necessarily have at my age, because I was pretty young when I was in that position. And I had the tangibles and the opportunity to grow with the things that I wasn't familiar with, like the science and how to command a weight room. So having the tools that aren't teachable or might not be the easiest to learn were kind of the things that separated me from interns in that class that I was with or interns that he had in the past. A comment that he had made was I had set the gold standard for an internship. And so it was kind of it was a good moment because it made me proud of the work that I did, because it was a whole year of showing up and making sure that the stuff that was the easiest stuff, or because the job, what I realized was as an intern or an assistant, you got to make your boss's job the easiest as it can be. So the easiest things that can get done, take care of it so they don't have to worry about that. So one of the biggest things when I was at Nebraska with Coach Joseph was getting there early and having the setup for the weight room lift session that day complete before he even was out of his office. Because I would usually show up, I would start setting up, and then he would come out. We would talk about our plan for the day, kind of go over the session, what the expectations are, and then guys would start fluttering in and we would get to work. So having that done so we could just talk about the session and get right to guys when they start coming in versus waiting for him to say, okay, let's start setting up. And now we're setting up when guys are getting ready to roll. Little things like that allowed for so much more fluidity with the session, and it just made the day so much easier. And a lot of the other interns weren't necessarily doing that. And I think those are kind of the little things that had stuck out, because there were interns that had more background than I did in science, and at that time were maybe more qualified to run a lift session and knew how to command a room because I was just getting started. But I would argue that in other ways, I provided more value for the men's basketball team and Coach Joseph because of what I was doing.
Well, see, I think that's the important thing, too, for people to understand is that what you bring to the table as far as your knowledge, your background, your experience is one thing. But then what you bring to the table as far as being an asset, being help, instead of being a burden, instead of having to be an additional problem for the coach, the business manager, your boss, you're there to make the program go smoother, run easier, and it stands out. And that's something that we have to learn in life in general, is that society has gotten, I think, to the point where we want to do the bare minimum. We want to skirt by. We just want to show up. The expectations to get paid. I mean, you look at California, for example, with the minimum wage hike that went on at fast food joints, and you get $20 an hour. And how many times you go through the drive-thru, for example, and you order something and then you leave and it's like not even your order, right? And so there's things like that. Just you get rewarded based on not merit, but on anything else. And so you don't get in return as a customer what the people are getting paid. And so for a young person to be able to get into an environment where you've got professionals that have been in the NBA, like Coach Joseph was, Hoiberg, the basketball coach, was the NBA. You've got NBA-bound players that are at college right now that are now in the NBA. And so you're starting to look at this big picture of, here's somebody that may not have had the science, so to speak, behind it, or may not have had the experience of running a weight room or lifts like maybe the NBA style would, but just being there, being available, thinking ahead. Okay, what's going to come next? What can I get ready next? What can I be prepared for next? And so that way, then all those things come together. Next thing you know, now you're with the basketball program and you're excelling and you're having a fun time. You're being able to travel a little bit. Eventually you graduate, and then it's okay, we got to start thinking about the next chapter of life. So you've got Coach Joseph, your mentor, that is keeping an eye out for you. But there's also, you make some connections. You talked about your connection with the professor, for example, and maybe meeting some of these other coaches and from other sports and maybe trying to help them out. But at the University of Nebraska, Scott Frost gets fired, and eventually Matt Rule comes to town. And he brings with him his strength and conditioning coach, Coach Joseph. And so you got a new strength and conditioning coach of football, something that is at the University of Nebraska, from my understanding, is completely by its own self, its own entity. So tell us a little bit about what made you, or how did you become connected with Coach Joseph and the football strength coach?
Coach Campbell.
Or Coach Campbell. And
So how I met Coach Campbell was they had all gotten to campus, and it was in the off season. Basketball had just finished, so I was spending a little more time over at the main stadium where football is located at, because all the basketball guys were pretty much gone off campus, so we didn't really have much going on in basketball. So I was going over really to help some other of the strength coaches over at the other facility. So one day, as I was walking through the facility, I saw Coach Campbell sitting there with some of the football guys. They were doing a photo shoot or something, and I walked past him, and I thought, is that Coach Campbell? And so I sat there for a minute thinking, should I go back and introduce myself? And initially I wasn't going to, but then I said, why not? Like, let's just go see what happens. I want to meet him. I was excited that he was new on campus and coming to campus. So I went back. I went up to him. I said, hey, are you Coach Campbell? And he said, yeah. And I introduced myself. I told him kind of my role. And I basically told him, I said, I'm young. I'm new to the field. This is my first year in strength conditioning. I'm an intern. I'm eager to learn. I'm looking to learn new perspectives and philosophies. Is there ever a time that I can stop by and maybe talk shop? And he said, stop by any day after 3. And so I remember I waited a day, and then I went in the next day. So 2 days after I went in, and he came out of a meeting, and I asked him if this was a good time, and he said, yeah, let's go. So we went into his office, and we talked shop for a little bit, introduced each other a little bit. He wanted to get to know me a little more and kind of my goals and aspirations of the field of strength conditioning. And then that kind of turned into a weekly thing where he, at the end of each meeting, he would give me an assignment. So he would give me some sort of research to go do, whether it's a topic of strength conditioning, resistance training, or cardiovascular training, whatever it might be, and go research it and then bring back what I found the next week and tell him about it. And then we would just build on those conversations. And then eventually it began to change into more of a, not necessarily a mentorship, but kind of like a guidance, where he was there for me because he started to stick his leg out for me, and he was in my corner. I told him I had aspirations about going to grad school and getting more of a science background and becoming a graduate assistant at a university somewhere. And so once we discussed that, he started to have me reach out to coaches that he knows where he used to be, because he used to be at Baylor in the Big 12. So he knew a lot of coaches in the Big 12, and then he was doing his time in the NFL with the Panthers. And so started reaching out to some coaches, and we started chatting about that. And then one day he was good friends with Coach Melton at the University of Baylor, and Coach Melton, he said, go reach out to Coach Melton. And so basically Coach Melton responded and said, I didn't have a position for you, but I'll keep your name in mind. And so months later, I haven't heard from Coach Melton since I sent that first initial email. And all of a sudden I get an email from OU, who is my current boss now, Coach Peak, and he tells me that they're interviewing for their graduate assistant for the fall of 23. And they asked if I was interested in interviewing, and I told them yeah, and I hopped on an interview the next day.
So you had a moment there, and this is the thing that's fascinating, and we all do this. We've all probably had that moment in time where it's like, should I? And then it becomes, why not go do it? Or should I? Well, he's a football coach. Maybe I won't because I just don't want to, or I'm too intimidated, or whatever the case may be. And so you miss an opportunity. And that's really what it's talking about, is missed opportunities, making the most of opportunities. And in this case, an opportunity was made to go talk to the coach. Now, the coach easily could have said, get lost, like LeBron James did to that kid in Paris, get lost, not now. Or he could have said, okay, just meet me later and we'll go from there. And then it's a choice. Okay, I'm going to show up. And when I do show up, I'm going to be there on time. I'm not going to make the coach wait because he's doing something special out of his, prerogative. It's his prerogative to help out. It's out of his purview. He doesn't have to help out. And so he does all that. And so again, when you have the opportunities and you think, should I or shouldn't I? Why not? Why not try to build a relationship with something? Why not take a chance? In the radio business, producing shows, we would try to get big time guests. And it was always just ask, because right now it's no, he's not coming on the show. It's right now it's no, Coach Campbell's not going to meet with you. But if you go and ask, it might be yes. And if it becomes a yes, then things start to change, like in your case. And so he had you do these assignments. And this is something I want to ask you about. So he had you do these assignments. Now, these assignments are not for grades. They're not for class. They're above and beyond. So you've got your academics for college. You're going to graduate, so you're getting ready for that. You still got some responsibility with your own position, and you're still trying to make connections and kind of shore things up as you graduate. And this guy's throwing extra work on top of it, but yet you decided to do that. Couple things. One, why did you decide to do it, and how beneficial was these assignments to you now in hindsight when you look back on them?
Yeah, so I decided to take advantage of the situation because he was gracious enough to invest his time and meet with me weekly. And being a director of football, strength conditioning, you don't have a lot of time throughout your day. So the fact that he was kind enough to let me come in weekly and talk to me and give me some of his time was I was super grateful. And so the fact that he would give me these assignments, I wasn't going to take that for granted, because I thought, well, if I don't do these assignments, then one, I'm wasting his time. And two, I'm just showing him that I'm not the person who I'm expressing myself to be. Because I'm sitting there in his office saying, I want to be a GA. I want to go be a director one day. Yet he gives me an assignment to go research plyometrics, and I come back after a week and I don't have anything, or I decide not to do it. Then how is that going to look when I come back and say, oh, I just didn't do it? It would show him that I'm not the guy who you should stick your leg out for. And so that's a big reason why I decided to do it. And two, I thought it would be a good learning experience as well. And so it was very beneficial, because as we built on each week, it was a new topic each week. And at the end of the time, he told me, he said, the reason why I had you do this research was I want you to be able to build a full program. So we went through all the topics, and now I have an understanding of what, in terms of programming, needs to be put in these specific lifts, right? So I have the resistance training background. I have the plyometric research. I have the cardiovascular research. I have all this research on all these different topics in the field of strength conditioning, and now I can put it together, and it all comes full circle. So it allowed me to understand the field so much more and what coaches are actually doing, because I had such a little amount of experience in terms of programming since I had just started. So in terms of development educationally, it was super big for me. So taking advantage of that situation was something that I wasn't going to let go.
Well, see, it reminds me of the old Karate Kid movie, wax on, wax off, brushing up and down. He's waxing cars. He's painting the fence, and Mr. Miyagi is getting him to be prepared to do those karate moves, right? And that was the wax on, wax off, the painting. They were all prerequisites for the karate. And so that's kind of the situation here, it sounds like, is he's getting you ready for something by having you do these things. Now, keep in mind, for those that don't know, which is probably all of you, when he talks about meeting with the coach, we're talking about he has a scooter. It could be wintertime, it could be cold, it could be weather, raining, whatever it is. There could be all kinds of conditions. And so it wasn't just like a comfortable experience getting to the office. There'd be times he'd get there and coach might be busy, might be in a meeting somebody else, whatever. So it wasn't just like this natural, smooth, easygoing thing. There were some challenges there, but you had to push through those challenges, whether it's on your scooter, weather-wise getting there. And that's just in general, whether it was meeting with the coach, whether it's trying to get to the gym during the basketball season, whether it's trying to get to your classes, whatever it is, it's overcoming those obstacles that we see as, oh, this is a burden. I have to go to my car, I have to warm up my car in the wintertime, 30 minutes ahead of time, scrape ice so I can get to class or get to work. And so we think of it as a burden, as a task, something in the way. But here for young kids, these are obstacles that could make or break a career. And in this case, if you had not done that, there might not be an opportunity at Oklahoma because the football strength coach, Joe Campbell, he might not have put your name in at Baylor. Baylor might not have called or gotten the call from Oklahoma. And the next thing you know, you'd be, who knows what you'd be doing right about now. But because of the work ethic, because of the relationship, because of the why not chance, you were able to make a connection. From that connection, you were able to fulfill the requirements of meeting with him on time, regularly, whether he was there or not, whether the elements were there or not, and you were able to do the assignments and you were able to talk about it, build that connection, build that relationship, prove to him the type of person that you are and the type of worker or the professional that you're going to be. Because think of it as professionalism. If you're in college, if you're a young person starting out, you're thinking about maybe your job right now. Maybe it's a coffee shop, maybe it's whatever it is. And so it's a job for you. But if you start thinking in terms of professionalism and being a professional, eventually that job that is going to come that you want, that dream job, that professionalism starts to build, even going back to your undergrad. And I always tell students when I was teaching radio broadcasting at a college, I would ask them, are you ready? If that dream job came right now, knocked on your door and said, hey, we want to hire you for this dream job of yours. And it could be any job. It doesn't have to just be the radio people, but I'd ask my radio students, if you were ready for any job, could you do it? And if you can't, why not? And if you can't and you can't answer why not, then what are you going to do to get there if that's what you wanted? And so it's being ready. Another student brought up the quote one time, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And that's always stuck with me because if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And so it sounds like to me from the get-go, from going back to that relationship with the professor to getting the internship to with the basketball guy, strength and conditioning guy, then to the football strength and conditioning guy, and to the other strength and conditioning guys, whether it be baseball, whatever sport it was, you're always sitting there trying to have that professionalism. That's the foundation for what you do, which then leads to your reputation. And now your reputation seems to be pretty good because now at the University of Oklahoma, you're starting to do even some more things out there and getting to know more people. And now you've got a new coach coming in and another person you have to impress. So there's always somebody there that's going to be coming in, and that professionalism, that reputation that's yours is going to be the one thing that most people are going to sit and look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, you never know who is watching or who you're going to be introduced to. It even stems from coaches that aren't strength coaches. Assistant coaches come up and they're always watching as well. And, head coaches are watching. So everybody's always watching you regardless of the position that you're in to see if there's something that you have that they can grasp onto and say, I have a young guy for you. Are you interested? Right? Because that's one of the biggest things is if you have people in your corner backing you up, it's going to help you so much more in terms of finding that next job because the field is so competitive. There's so many people striving for director roles and, in the NBA and in college athletics, yet there's so little positions. And so understanding that you there's always going to be somebody watching you. It might not always be your boss or the guy who you're directly working for, but just remember that there are going to be people that are around watching, and you never know what's going to come about it. Because me going and reaching out to Coach Campbell, I had no clue that he was going to stick his leg out for me and say, start emailing these people. And then I didn't realize that those guys that I reached out to were going to do the same thing. Like I still to this day have never met Coach Melton in person. We've had a couple emails back and forth, but that's about it. And the fact that he was willing to say to the University of Oklahoma, this is a guy that you should look at, without even knowing me, just taking or having a conversation from Coach Campbell. And honestly, I don't even know if Coach Campbell had a conversation with Coach Melton. It might have just been because I said in that email, Coach Campbell told me to reach out to you about a GA, that's the reason of why I'm at OU now. And so it was being persistent and, like you had said, always going, making sure I was on time. 3:00 every Thursday was when I would go and meet Coach Campbell, and I would never be late. I would always show up 10 minutes early. I would sit in the waiting room, and I would just go over what I was going to tell him, because I wanted to present myself well and show him that, you know, I'm serious about wanting to pursue strength and conditioning, and not necessarily just pursue it, but also be good at it eventually. And so doing so, that was, I believe that was the big reason why he started to tell me to reach out to people and use his name, because I would show up on time every week. I would be there at the same time, regardless of if he was available or not. Because there were times where I would go and he'd walk out of his office. I'd be like, hey, coach. He's like, not today, man. I got a meeting. Like, okay, I'll see you next week. He's like, see you next week. Or there was a time when you talked about weather, where we had a big snowstorm, and I think it was like 14 inches of snow, and there was just no way I was getting there on my scooter. And so I ended up walking 40 minutes to the facility so I could meet him. And so it turned out that day that football was canceled. Everything was canceled. So no one was even in the building. And so I ended up writing a note on a piece of paper, letting him know that I was there, because I didn't want him to think that I dodged him if he was there, because he gave me that opportunity to come in. So I wrote this note on a piece of paper, and the next time I saw him, he said, we were talking more about next steps, and he told me, he said, I don't know you, right? We have these conversations, but I don't really know who you are yet, but I know you're persistent. And then he said, you wrote me a note, for crying out loud, to let me know that you were here. So let's start to reach out to coaches and let's see where we can get you. And so I think that even though, yes, I was doing the research, which was a big part of it, I think going back to the little things of always showing up on time, you know, doing your best, having a good demeanor, you know, I could have been upset about the times when he wasn't there, or when I went in and he said, I can't meet today because I have a meeting. But I understood that, one, it was a privilege and a really good opportunity that he was dedicating some time each week to meet with me. So even though some weeks it didn't work out, I was still gracious for the opportunity to still go in and say, hey, coach. And then that led to him introducing me to his staff. And then his staff telling me, hey, if you don't find anywhere to go once you graduate, you can come and intern with us. And so there's just opportunities start to build once you show how much you really want it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have it all figured out right away, because I'm going into year 3 and I'll still tell coaches I still don't have it figured out. And I don't necessarily think you ever do figure it out, because there's new science that comes out, and you know, if you're not adapting, then that's probably an issue. So, but having those tangibles that you can't teach, going back to how it started with my mentor, Coach Joseph, those are the things that I truly believe that are going to allow me to be successful in this field and propel me over other candidates for high-level positions, because I have the tools that you can't teach, yet I'm learning the stuff that I don't know, when other kids might know that stuff because you can learn it, but they don't know the other stuff necessarily.
Yeah, you mentioned Coach Joseph, the basketball guy. You got Joseph's the basketball guy, Campbell's the football guy. You've got Peaks at Oklahoma. You've got Milton down at Baylor. So a lot of names I know that people listening might not know, but you're just basically dealing with strength and conditioning coaches for athletic teams at the universities. And so you mentioned Coach Joseph, which is the basketball guy, the guy that you spent a lot of time working directly with. How important was that relationship, or is that relationship with him? But how much was that development with being there, learning from him? Because you say you weren't really the science guy behind it. You came in with a different background, and to be able to learn some of those new concepts and new things that you might not have known, and to be able to work with somebody that had the time and the ability, because obviously from our conversation, you proved that you're worthy of somebody to invest their time into you. You weren't a flake. You showed up early. You showed up on time. You were there working extra, getting everything done, thinking ahead, make sure things are prepared. So obviously somebody like that is going to be deemed worthy for a professional to invest their time in. I know when I was teaching radio, I would look at the students, and the students that were on time, that did their shows, that did what they were supposed to, they would get more of my time because I would invest it in them, where the people that just showed up, maybe they were late, flaky, whatever, wouldn't get as much time because it seemed that my time being valuable and short, I needed to invest it in people that were worthy of it. And that seems the case with you and Coach Joseph. But tell us a little about that relationship and how important that is to you.
Yeah, my relationship with Coach Joseph is huge. He's been a big mentor for myself, and not necessarily just in the field of strength and conditioning, but also in life. He's usually one of the first guys I call if I need to talk about something, or if something's going on and I don't necessarily have the answer, or even just if I want to talk to somebody and just see how someone's doing, or, just take a step away from the facility and school and just take a step back and just have a conversation. He's my mentor, but I look at him more as like a friend now too, because I've known him for a couple years now, and our friendship has just grown so much because we've spent so much time together. It was weird. I told him this when I left. I said, when I got to OU, I said, it's weird not seeing you every single day, because after a year of working for him, we'd see each other literally every single day for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, because we were always with each other. Because it didn't stop when weights were done. We had our weight sessions, all right? Then weights were done. Then we would spend time collecting our data. So then we would do our data analysis and our data management. So we had everything nice and crisp. So if something were to have come up, we had it ready to present to the coaching staff. Then we would go to practice. And practice was a time where usually it was a big teaching time, because once guys are ready and warmed up, we don't really do much in practice. We just kind of sit back and watch and just talk. So that would be a time where I would utilize to discuss topics with him and try to pick his brain. And then he would also pick my brain. I mean, there's times where he would ask me questions. He would say, what is this muscle doing in this movement? What muscles are working in this movement? And if I didn't have the answer, he'd be like, give me 100 push-ups. So I'd be in the middle of practice. We would be warming the guys up, and he would say, go in the middle of the court and do 100 push-ups. Keep in mind, head coach is right there, staff, they're all right there, and everyone's like, why is David doing push-ups? But that one speaks to volumes, I think, of the relationship we have, because I know that he cares. My best interest is his number one priority. And two, it was a good learning tool, because I never missed that question again. I came back the next day and I had that answer. So the fact that he would make me do these things, if I didn't have the answers, I would go and research them after and come back the next day, because I didn't want to be somebody who, I was terrified of coming back the next day and him asking me that same question and not having the answer. Because one, that would have shown, in my eyes, it would have shown that I don't care to learn or to continue to grow. I don't even want to give the sense to a coach that I'm starting to feel complacent, because I don't. I still believe that regardless of who I'm talking to, I'll always have that mindset of, I don't not a know-it-all. I don't know it all. This guy knows more than I do. And then based on conversation, we can have conversation to see how that goes. But the relationship with Kurt has been great. He's invested so much time into me, and he's currently doing his PhD as well. So the fact that he's a director of a Division I college basketball team who doesn't only just do strength and conditioning, he does return to play, he does rehab, he does recruiting, he does meeting, all this stuff. And then he has admin work. And then on top of that, he has his PhD. For him to invest time into me outside of it. Because there's times, too, where we would want to get away from the facility and we'd go climb. We'd go to little hole-in-the-wall places and go grab food and just talk and get away. One of his quotes that he always would tell me was, you gotta go live your life. And so you gotta remember that there's a fine line between your work and then your life outside of work, and you can't just be always in your work. And so he really pushed that on me when I was there to go live your life, because I had a similar drive to him, where I would go and I would just get in these rabbit holes, and after a long day of work and then going to class, I would go and sit at a coffee shop and just go and read articles, or I would just go and research things. And then I have friends texting me, hey, you want to go do this or you want to go do that? And I wouldn't respond, or I would say, no, I'm busy. And so he taught me so much about the field of strength conditioning, but he also has taught me so much about life and just learning to take a step back and realize that it's not serious. None of this is serious. Like, be good at your job, but when you're out of the facility, be out of the facility and just go live your life. So he's been super impactful into my life. And I talk to him. I try to talk to him as much as I can. We talk weekly, sometimes every other week, but we still talk to this day. And, we get on phone calls and just chat, and, it's just fun talking to him. He's a great mentor, and he's going to be somebody that, hopefully in a couple of years, a goal of mine is to be working for him again.
So you talk about how you got there. Just to kind of recap, because there's been a lot of conversation. It starts out with building a relationship with a professor, doing your work in the classroom. From that position or from that relationship, you get a position, in the rec room, and then an internship, and then the internship turns into further internship with the men's college basketball team at Nebraska, and then from there it's a chance meeting with the football coach, the strength and conditioning coach for the Nebraska football team. And then from there, it's a connection to Baylor. And then from Baylor, a phone call to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma to you. And that's where you're at now. So it kind of comes full circle. But here's the point, too, to remember for those listening, that there's a couple things when you make something happen, when you make your passion happen. The first thing is you've got to do the work. You can't just sit back and expect it to come to you. You've got to put in the work. We've heard about showing up early, staying late, making sure that things are prepped and ready to go. So when the strength coach walks in, things are ready to go. We've talked about meeting other people on your own time through rain, snow, sleet, hail, whatever. Be there, be on time, be early. Be early is really the key. Research, doing what you're asked to do. And so as you are getting help from these professionals that are in the business, helping you find your next grad school to go to, or maybe your next job, or whatever it is, as they're helping you and they're investing their time into you, you're earning that because of the work that you're doing. I don't think, one, you would have gotten that where you are today without the work ethic that you have and without putting in your time. Because, like you said, if Coach Joseph says you're the gold standard, it's not because he's just thought you were his favorite. It's because you put the work in and you showed it. If you're going to get a referral from somebody, maybe just by name or maybe just by the fact that there was a connection, and so Baylor throws a recommendation to Oklahoma, it's a reputation, a professional reputation that you're building up. And the one thing you got to know, especially if you're young and you're in college, and sure, college is about to start, and you're thinking about rushing a fraternity or sorority, and you're thinking about all the parties you're going to be going to, and you think about all this fun stuff that you're going to do. Keep in mind, there's two things that can happen. One, you have a fun time and nothing. Or two, something happens that could destroy your future, could hurt your future. I mean, there's all kinds of athletes, there's volleyball players, there's other people along the way that have done things that have made the headlines throughout time that have impacted perhaps their ability to do things. Now, athletes, musicians, movie stars, obviously get a benefit of the doubt because of name recognition, what they do. But just think of you as college student, as really a nobody in the grand scheme of things, and the stuff you do versus what you get out of it. So if you're investing in yourself, much like we've heard here today, your return is going to be greater. If you're putting a little bit of investment in you, then your return is going to be less. And you could still be successful one day, and you could still go on to do great things, but maybe it takes a little bit longer. Maybe there's a little bit longer of a struggle because you didn't make those connections, because the why nots. I should go meet this guy. Well, maybe not. Well, why not? Those why not opportunities were missed, and therefore you don't have the connections, the networking. Maybe you didn't like your professor for something. I've been many years in college. Many years I've had instructors that I didn't like. Many years I've had, or many classes, I should say, people I'm like, why am I even here? But I did my due diligence to get through it and was able to pass and get my education. So sometimes we have to do things that we don't want to because we're investing in ourselves. And sometimes we get to do things that we want to because we have invested in ourselves. People have seen that, and now people are investing in us, and we get to reap that benefit, that reward. So again, it's all about the work that you do first, about making your passion happen. You've got to put in the work first. You decide what you want to do, and then you chase it. You go after it. Then from there, when you're putting the work in, are you making those connections? Are you doing those why not moments? Maybe I should email somebody. Maybe I want to be a doctor. Maybe I want to be a musician. Maybe I want to be something. And I like the way these guys do their thing, so I'm going to send them an email. I'm going to try to reach out. Maybe they respond, and maybe they get back to you, and then maybe there's something that goes on with that, some sort of a mentoring relationship or whatever. You got to put the work in. You got to do the time, invest in yourself, and then that way the return becomes a lot better. As you move forward now, you got another year of college, and then, of course, you've got this transition to the SEC, which should make it for a fun year. But then as you start to look for post-college, career-minded work, what are some of the challenges? Because it's one thing to be in college, and it's one thing to kind of have that safety net of college, so to speak. But now once you get beyond college and into the professional world, there's a whole different game. There's no school to fall back on. You've got to go out and make it. So two things. One, what's the future looking like from this perspective now looking forward? What would you like it to be? And then two, how do you continue to do what you've been doing with your work ethic, your meeting people, your networking, keeping those connections, so that you don't get complacent and think, oh, I've made it, therefore I'm done?
So I'm in that position where after my time at OU is done, I'll be looking for my first job, and I've been told by a few strength coaches, they've said, your first job is your easiest job that you'll get, because a lot of coaches, head coaches, like younger guys because of the relatability piece to their athletes. And so getting that first job compared to maybe the second or the third, from what I've been told, is going to be a lot easier than those future jobs. I think, one, it's going to be a situation where I get a call from either my mentors or coaches that know about me or I've worked for in the past, and they'll present an opportunity to me. And if it works out, that'll probably be something where I end up going because of the field and how it's designed, to where it goes back to, you got to know the right people. And if you don't know the right people, or the right people don't know you, then how are they going to know that you're a candidate for a position? And so I believe it'll be a situation where one of my former bosses or current bosses, or my mentor, will give me a call and say, hey, there's a position, they're interested, are you interested? And then go through that process and see what it turns out to be. And then in terms of understanding to not get complacent, don't ever forget where you've come from. There's a lot of coaches out there, and people in general, that when they're at the bottom of the barrel, they do everything. They do the grunt work. They show up. They constantly grind to try to get to that top position, in this case, a director role, whether that's in college at a high major in the SEC, or if it's in, the NBA somewhere, and they get there and they start to think that they're above certain things. So never forget where you came from, regardless of the position you're in. You could be a VP of the Orlando Magic, but just because you're in that position, if someone falls on the ground in practice, go get a towel and you'll wipe the floor. That's a pretty standard example, especially when it comes to basketball. But just don't forget, don't start to believe that just because of your title, you're above doing the grunt work, right? There's with our staff at OU, this is where I learned it from. It stems from everyone, our sports dietitian, our strength coaches, our staff, people in practice, they fall on the floor. Everybody's rushing to the floor to wipe it up because we don't want another athlete to slip on that floor and potentially harm themselves. The sports dietitian, she still makes smoothies for the guys and girls. Our strength coach, we pick up after everybody in the weight room. We clean the weight room ourselves. We wipe things down. We do all the little things, right? If coach were to ask me to scrub the floor with a toothbrush, then I would take the toothbrush and I would scrub the floor, regardless of how long it would take me. So just having that mindset of you're not big, you're not bigger than any task that might get thrown at you is something that I believe would help. It'll help me in terms of not becoming complacent, because it can get difficult when you are in a position of authority and you think that you have so many other things to do, which is true. When you become a director and you're in a higher position, you have a lot more on your plate. But understanding that in those situations, you're not above all the little things, that's going to be a big piece in terms of understanding to continue to grow and understand where you came from and not be complacent.
So as we wrap up, remember, invest in yourself, do the work, make other people see that you are worthy of their time and their effort. Don't become complacent. Chase those why not moments. Network. Don't let those opportunities go away. Develop those relationships. Have fun. Do get out of the gym and go live your life, but also know that you still have to do the work, and people will invest in you more so if they see that you are a worthy investment. But ultimately, do the work, invest in yourself, and it'll pay off down the line. David, thanks so much. We appreciate your time and your thoughts and your words, and we wish you all the best down the road. For those of you listening, check out our website, RadioWarp.com. That's radio, W-A-R-P, RadioWarp.com. You can click the logo, and all of our past shows pop up. There's an orange banner across the bar. Click that. It goes to our SoundCloud page. We're on YouTube, Rumble, pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just hit the internet search, Two Steps Ahead Podcast, TWO, Two Steps Ahead Podcast, and we pop up. You can email the show, twostepsaheadpodcast@gmail.com. That's twostepsaheadpodcast@gmail.com. And we're pretty much, like I said, easy to find. Hey Siri, hey Google, hey Alexa, play TWO, Two Steps Ahead Podcast, and we pop up. So RadioWarp.com is the website. We're pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. Go ahead and reach out and let us know what's going on. And again, I always like to end the show with this. If you're going through something and you don't know what it is, you don't know who to turn to, you don't know anything, you think you're on an island by yourself, reach out. I'm on, like I said, the email, twostepsaheadpodcast@gmail.com. I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, at Two Steps Ahead Podcast. You can DM me. You can reach out. If I can't help you, I'll find somebody that can help you so you don't have to do it alone. So make sure you reach out and don't go through it alone. There's always somebody going to be there to help you, and it could start with me if you don't have anybody else. So again, Two Steps Ahead Podcast, encouraging you. Take your passion, make it happen. Let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom. Special guest David Edom with us. Hey, thanks for listening. Do tell a friend, and until next time, God bless.